Altus Group's software, data, and advisory services help bring the clarity, perspective, and insights you need to minimize the risk and maximize the value of your investments. Because it's not simply how much data you have, it's how clearly you see it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of RealCom Live. We got a great conversation in store for you today. So, when we're doing and choosing these topics, some would be considered interesting, some would be considered fun, some would be considered technical, innovative. I would characterize today's conversation as important. And not that all of our other RealCom Live conversations aren't, but as most of you know, our industry is going through some pretty historic changes right now. Prior to the pandemic, we were leading our way in digital transformation within the real estate industry. A lot more mobile workers, more digital workplaces. And I would say our industry was probably a little bit further behind some others, but nonetheless, we still were moving forward. Then came the pandemic and this massive global work from home project, or the idea of telling everybody at the same time that they had to work from home, play from home, educate from home, and in some cases even get healthcare from home. So we probably condensed 10 years into 2. And with that came an enormous amount of change as to how we view the workplace. The old days of the hour and a half commute in were challenged. And now that the pandemic is over, they continue to be challenged. And I don't think we have any pure data yet. The key number or piece of information that I look for is lease expiration date, because it will be that day where major companies, make decisions to either keep the same amount of space or to take less space. Early indications, anecdotal indications are that this is happening. And that's the focus of today's important conversation. In the built environment, you need to follow the money. The money starts with the tenant who pays the rent to the landlord, and everything goes downhill from there. So let me bring on our 3 very important guests: Maureen Ehrenberg, CEO of Blue Skyer; Ryan Albaugh, Corporate Properties Tech Strategy Lead for Wells Fargo; and David Gunter, Head of Global Workplace for Pinterest. Hello, you 3. How are you?
Good. How are you, Jim?
Good. Not only are you 3 smart people, but I'm proud and happy to say you're also our 3 co-chair for our upcoming CoRE Tech, which will be this November in Silicon Valley, where we get together not a large group of people. Over the years, it's varied in size, but it's designed to be an intimate conversation with people who aren't tire kickers, don't get into tech and innovation for the fun of it or because it's the shiny new object. And most of you have been very involved with us over the years and know the kinds of conversations we have and the ideas and the innovation that comes out. So thank you for taking that role. You've all been advisors. This year, you're co-chairs, and I don't think we could have picked better 3. And I think this conversation will illustrate that. So let's, why don't you take 30 seconds each of you. We'll start with Ryan, go around. Just give the audience a little idea of what your day consists of for these big companies and all these massive real estate assets that you deal with.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks for inviting me to this. So my day-to-day responsibilities really include the development of technology strategy for our corporate properties group. I work very closely with our technology partners to implement that that roadmap that goes along with that strategy. We are at the very beginning stages of a multi-year roadmap that will really, I think, put a lot of new and great innovative tools and functionality into the hands of our corporate properties team, allowing them to operate our real estate more efficiently and effectively. So we've got a lot of projects in the hopper right now. We've got a lot of great work with new real estate strategies and adopting our tools or finding new tools to meet those strategies. So a lot going on in my world these days.
Well, and we see the Wells Fargo signs everywhere. Give me an idea. How many square feet totally in the portfolio?
I think we're right around 82 million square feet right now, and that includes our offices, our branches, and some other random types of real estate in between, but mostly office and branches.
Big portfolio. David, what does your day look like?
So just for some perspective, Jim, and thanks for inviting me. I was hired in February of 2020, and so literally like a month before the world came to a halt. And so everything that I do today is fundamentally different than the job I was hired to do, and I don't think that's different than a lot of people in this work. Really, I spend most of my time trying to figure out what is the purpose of our real estate strategy and real estate assets going forward. Where do we put them? What is their purpose, and how do we build them? And there's a lot of intersections with technology, of course, but really understanding the purpose of the office for the post-COVID worker. And it's completely different, at least from what we're seeing in early patterns. Large spikes of events, people coming together to meet on periodic basis. But this steady rhythm of the daily commuter is obviously much smaller than pre-COVID. And so having to account for those spikes in volume is challenging. So just in terms of the total amount of space we need, but also how do we build it? How do we make it fit for purpose and most effective for our team? So that's the majority of my time is really thinking about that and working with my team to come up with new ideas.
And we're going to get to it in a moment, but starting in February of 2020, you were one of the first people in to make major decisions on your portfolio. We'll get to it in a second, but I'm looking forward to that conversation. Maureen, how are you this morning?
Oh, very well. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
It's a good group here. So I think that really what we spend day to day on is very much between what Ryan and Dave are speaking about. Our role is more of a facilitator and then a strategic advisor thinking through. So one, solving for the cost issue. So once someone's finally landing on a model where they've looked at their costs, they've looked at the productivity implications, what is the convenience or inconvenience of a commute for these different kind of profiles that they'll look at for personas for workers, and then ultimately getting down to utilization and understanding, an operating model needs to be created. So looking at the technology, looking at the people, looking at the built environment, and then understanding that there's many different opportunities to consume space as a service today. And so what is that right fit for purpose model for that organization? And it differs.
Right. Well, and just to give some context, your career, senior level executive at CBRE, senior level executive at JLL and WeWork, you have touched hundreds, if not thousands, of major multinational companies dealing with their real estate needs. So it's not just somebody who's sitting here talking, it's somebody who's been at this a while and understands that what we're about to talk about is not an easy problem to solve. This is complex, has a million moving pieces, and you just can't find a shiny new object, apply and wake up in the morning and your problem is fixed, right? So that's the context of this conversation. So I always like to get right to the heart. So all of your brethren, your peers, corporate real estate executives, senior facilities people, workplace people, what is keeping them awake at night? And I'm going to go to David first, because David, you kind of already mentioned this a little bit in your open. So elaborate a little bit. I mean, not just you and Pinterest, but what are you hearing on the streets in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different things depending on where you sit. So I think people who are used to supporting folks in the office there's a lot of anxiety because you're not seeing people come back at the same rates that maybe we had hoped. And certainly some cities are coming back more than others. My peers that I talk to, seeing very similar patterns to there is absolutely a desire for people to get together and spend time together. But I think there's really a demand that it be more purposeful, planful. The environments that we create to host these events need to really accommodate those events. And so the workplaces that we've built over time with flexible workstations and conference rooms really don't seem to match the supply and demand of what we're seeing today. And so I think what I encourage my team a lot is we can't really measure our performance in sort of the old paradigm of I manage this many square feet, I have this, this many locations. We really have to redefine what it is in terms of the services we provide, the amenities we provide, the experiences that we create. Because if you measure your worth in square feet and number of properties, I think people may be
Wrong message.
disappointed going
Yeah.
forward. So anyway,
Yeah, it's a wrong message. That's old paradigm. I remember going to events and everybody would, kind of, I got X millions of square feet, and that was your badge of honor. Not anymore. It's a whole different world. Maureen, so you talk to a lot of people. You're just not running one real estate organization. You're helping many organizations. What are they freaking out about today? I mean, you said you were on a call this morning. What is the conversation?
Well, the conversation is typically around, if I had to look at areas, number one is operationalizing not only this new concept of however they're going to view their space and consume their space and manage production space and data centers, but because it's all different. So you have to have a strategy for the different components. But how are you operationalizing ESG throughout those workflows? How are you actually operationalizing your digital strategy? So a lot about what Brian and Dave are talking about, that has to flow through. So you're looking at all of your old work streams, your old ways of doing project management, facility management, workplace services, site acquisitions, land acquisitions, and then redefining the integration of those work streams. That's a very, very hot and important topic because it's the only way to change the way you're working. I think there's this recognition, and it goes along with Dave saying everything else, if it seems like it's just something you're pulling in, it's not consistent, it's not part of how you do your job. And then the other thing is just this complexity around where should the real estate be? Before the pandemic, everyone knew it had to be at the corner of Main and Main. Well, guess what? The corner of Main and Main isn't so hot right now. It's these district areas, it's these niche areas. What is the next hot niche area within an urban environment? Because people prefer to aggregate there. Maybe it's the street parking, the convenience of restaurants and shopping or whatever is around it, and people are solving for it in different ways. But I will say a lot of investors and corporates alike are scratching their head that it's like, how the heck did the center go out of the center and start going out in all these different cool neighborhoods?
Well, right. Well, and then you add the crime factor that we're seeing in all of our major cities. The CEO of Prologis was robbed by gunpoint and basically said to the mayor and to the governor of California, "Fix it, or I'm taking my company out of here." Right. So now we're post-pandemic, and now we got urban area issues. But tell me this: how do we solve conflicting problems? I need you in that office. We need to build culture. You need to do that hour commute, and yet we're going to meet those ESG goals, which means we can't burn carbon that you burn on that hour commute. I mean, there are so many conflicting goals.
Well, I'll just say one more thing on this, and that is a lot of people are using RTO, return to the office. And I was speaking with someone yesterday that's like, we've just got to drop the R because no one's returning to the office. So it's more around redefining how we are going to use it, when we're going to use it, what it's for, a lot of what Dave was just talking about. So that's one of the biggest issues is executives finally making those decisions around the portfolios that they've been pushing decisions off, because there still is, with many leaders, a desire to have everyone around them. And you just have to balance between your company culture. What is your culture of work?
Right.
How are you defining that culture of work? And then how are you rolling it out?
Well, an article yesterday, the CEO of General Motors apologized to the workforce because they put a policy in place that says we need you back in the office 3 days a week. Tremendous pushback to the point where she had to apologize and basically saying, okay, we're sorry, and we'll revisit this after the first of the year. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in my career where the workers are dictating. And I get working from home. I get mobile workers. I get the flexibility. But I also understand, that sometimes work requires people to be in the same place. Maybe not that urban center anymore, but maybe, like you said, satellites in edge or areas. But I've never in my life seen this amount of tension in how we're going to use specifically corporate space, which PS are the tenants of the commercial folks. and we're going to get that in a second. And I'm gonna let you guys know we're probably going to go a little longer on this Realcomm Live because I'm looking at the clock and we haven't even begun to get in the questions. And this is probably the most important topic. So if you guys wouldn't bear with us, maybe give us an extra 5 minutes. We're going to go a little longer today. Ryan, you wake up in the morning, eyes wide open. What are you thinking about?
Well, I mean, I'm probably echo what Maureen and Dave has said up to this point. I mean, we've had a group of Wells Fargo staff that never left the office, right? Those folks who went to the branches and supported our customers and their financial needs. They were always in the office performing those activities. So part of our work staff was there. Part of our work staff, like everyone else, probably came back at the beginning of this year. Part of them just came back like within the last month. And so we are actually, Maureen, still returning to the office. And I think what things that we're thinking about, Jim, is as we're coming back, we do have some asks of our staff groups of how many times a week they do come back. But that's going to impact how we use our space. That will impact how we design our space. That'll impact how we make adjustments to the technology because we want people to have this sort of this hybrid experience. But it needs to be, especially for Wells Fargo, obviously secure, right? When you're working remote or when you're working from home, as secure as if you're working from the office. And so, how do we as a corporate properties group extend the workplace experience to the hybrid experience, right? And so thinking about the digital.
We're going to get to that in a second. The experience, is that a social experience? Is that a collaboration experience? Is that an intellectual experience? We're going to get to that in a second. Let's take a brief break. We'll come right back, and then I want to talk about the shedding of space, because that is the key number we're all looking at. If something's going to really transform an industry, how much of a reduction of office space are we going to see in the next 36 months to get an idea of what this thing looks like on the other side. Be right back.
The way we think about the office has changed. When you need to manage dynamic work models, new employee expectations, and keep up with compliance, you need a mobile-first, data-powered strategy and a partner that understands the building of the future because they're inventing it. It's time for real-time visibility over your workforce and your space, so you can track, communicate, plan, and optimize, whether you manage one site or many. Honeywell Sign makes it easy to keep your workforce working, no matter what the future holds.
All right. David, February 2020, you started Pinterest. You guys made a headline that year by being one of the first, the most aggressive organizations to say, we get it. We know where this is going. We can see the future. And we're willing to pay $89.5 million to cancel a lease because we don't think we're going to need that space. That was way ahead. Why don't you give us a little overview of that time frame when you were making that decision and what the thinking was all about?
Sure. I think, it's easy to read the headline and think, that a company's abandoning a market or indexing entirely towards virtual first. And in our case, that really wasn't what was happening. We had the benefit of having some optionality. And so, we had additional real estate footprint in the market that we were able to take advantage of, that we were already occupying. And, the way I think about options analysis is you already are where you are. You're likely going to be wrong in whatever decision you make. How wrong can you afford to be? Okay. And so it's really a matter of scenario modeling and understanding what has to be true in order for us to make a good decision or for this decision to be a good one. And so I think in our particular case, it wasn't sort of abandonment of the office in general or the concept of the office. It was that particular project was something that didn't make sense for us in the moment. We had optionality in San Francisco already, and we had an idea of what COVID might do to the workforce long term. I mean, I don't think anybody certainly predicted where we're at today, but we weren't naive and had some idea that this was existential in nature. This is going to be long term. This is not transient, and so we were willing to make that call based on the analysis that we looked at.
Are you able to share the square footage of that project?
Sure. Yeah, it's publicly reported. It was, I think, slightly under 500,000 square feet. I want to say like 460, something like that.
Big project. Big project.
Yeah, so we would have been an anchor tenant in that project, and yeah, it's unfortunate when things like that happen. Certainly we wouldn't have done something with the intent of not doing it, but yeah, it was the best decision for us at the time.
But if you look at the constructs of the idea of digital transformation and what we were all out there for 10, 15, 20 years talking about, started with the laptop computer and freedom from the desk. The pandemic just accelerated that whole mindset by
absolutely. Yeah, I think really what it did is it made controversial topics or third rails, normalize them. And so right. Us in corporate real estate have been talking about, hey, we shouldn't have assigned desks. This person doesn't come in every day. Why do we have that? And it was always too hard of a problem for companies to have to address. And all these things that were difficult just became no-brainers. And so if in my mind, COVID was really just an acceleration of a lot of things that needed to happen. It wasn't the introduction of novel concepts necessarily.
Right. Ryan, when we were talking the other day, you gave a number. Are you able to share the percentage that Wells Fargo is trying to get to as far as shedding of space over the next few years?
Yeah, what I'll say to that, Jim, it's likely going to be somewhere between 10 and 20%, just kind of based on how our hybrid workforce comes back and ends up leveraging our space, right? We actually were moving to an unassigned seating situation before COVID. We were on a track to start shedding space before COVID. We had some tasks that we were trying to meet. I think to Dave's point, we that accelerated, and now that we're in a more of a hybrid mode, that will continue to escalate. We as an enterprise are moving more towards agile, and so creating agile spaces for our teams, more collaborative spaces, more amenities, all that kind of stuff are areas that we need to look in. What we do know is that a lot of the traditional workstation space, especially the space that we have today, is likely going to go through quite a few renovations as we look to downsize.
But even a 20% portfolio your size, it's a lot of real estate, right?
It is. Yes, it is. And we probably have a lot more to do, especially on our branch side. We've taken the enterprise has taken a technology first approach to our digital banking. So I'm sure we'll start to see some impact of that as that strategy rolls out at an enterprise level, and we'll start to look at and see where does it make sense to consolidate some of the branches. I know we've got high concentrations in many areas, and as we go more digital, I'm sure we'll see a higher rate of dispositioning of those properties.
Well, and Maureen, before I have you answer that question, yesterday, an article about the CEO of General Motors put the back to the office 3 days a week policy in place, got such a backlash from the workforce, she was forced to apologize and to walk back that policy and said, all right, we'll deal with this after the first of the year. That's a stunning occurrence that a major organization like General Motors would be seeing that kind of depth of pushback. And I think about that in relation to what Ryan just said. If Wells Fargo experiences that number could be a lot higher than 20% as the next 12 to 18 months tell us what this new workforce is going to look like. So Maureen, you talk to a lot of people. Just pull a number out of your hat, and we're not going to hold it to it, obviously, but what's the number of real estate that's going to be shed by corporate America as a percentage next 24 to 36 months?
I'm going to say closer to 30-40%. It's probably double at least what Ryan's saying. Some have gone 100%. They've shed all of it. Again, depends on the business. I want to be clear. I believe that there is a need for a workplace.
I do too. Absolutely.
So when I was saying what my friend said, it supports what happened at GM. There are many of these leaders that we speak with that have made the real estate teams have come forward with hybrid work models. They've come up with the idea of consuming space and trying to rationalize and sharing and unassigned and open and maybe creating a lot more collaboration space. And they're like, wow, that's a lot of capital. That's a lot of project management. And Dave just said it earlier. There's no right answer right now because they really don't know ultimate demand. So there's this lack of, some groups don't want to invest yet. And there's this hope. Hope is not a strategy, but there's hope where, hey, everyone's going to return to the office the way it was. The point is, that's a perfect example of a whole group going, no.
Well,
So hybrid,
and
the hybrid is the solution. It's this incremental. And so what'll happen is that 40% may end up being 60% in 5 years, because what's going to happen is people can then iterate and look and use other models like a WeWork or a Industrious. They can use that to buffer. So there's all sorts of options, and that's where people are getting to in these hybrids.
yeah, and when you think about what it's going to take to get to that model, to undo all the formats that we put in place, the cube farms and the conference rooms that aren't enough, to David's point, and it's all going to come at a cost, to your point, and that's what's going to be, I think, the real struggle. Paradigm shifts are never easy, and I think I was going to say 30 to 35%. So if you came off your 40, I think 30 to 35% is something that is not too far-fetched. All right. One other question as relates to that, and we've lost David. Hopefully we can get him back. Are the people on the other side, the landlords, are they aware that it could be 20 to 30%? Let's pick the average, okay? Are you hearing, what are you hearing, Maureen, on the streets? Are they preparing for this? Are they planning for this? Or are they kind of thinking and hoping things are just going to go back to, old school normal?
No, I think, yeah, there are probably some landlords that think that, but I think for the most part, the landlords are highly engaged and tuned in the conversation, and they are getting creative around the use of space. And that's the beauty of, I think, you talk about ESG, mixed use opportunities, different uses within buildings, rethinking malls, rethinking office buildings, rethinking some of these older motels that are everywhere. There's a plethora of them, but what can be done with them? So I think the real estate investment community is really responding to this, rethinking, okay, that was an office building, but maybe it doesn't need to be pure office building anymore. That can be mixed use. So that's what they're thinking. They're also doing, providing co-working and different types of collaborative space themselves, which I think is really smart.
Right. So we only have a couple minutes, even after I extended us. If you can answer this in 30 seconds, because I got two more questions I want to get through. 30 seconds on this one. Ryan, give me the top technology concept idea that will help in this formulation of this new hybrid workplace. What's a technology you're looking at to make this thing ubiquitous for the worker, no matter where they're doing their work?
Yeah, it's a combination of technologies, Jim. What I'll say, and supported probably by a platform or a set of platforms that are come together through API. But I think the single most important, and Maureen touched on it a little bit earlier, is being able to measure utilization at least near real time, and that's a number of technologies I think that can perform that based on what kind of strategy you deploy for that utilization. But if you don't understand who's coming into your spaces, when they're coming in, and how frequently they're coming in, you probably have no idea how to change that space for the future as it starts to not get used the same ways or need to get used in the same ways, or how to design that space.
And that goes to our off-camera conversation about universal wideband and the privacy issues. That's an easy thing. Everybody's phones now have it. You can monitor that pretty easily, but then there's the privacy issues that have to go around with that. That's right. Maureen, number one technology idea that's going to be in this hybrid workplace.
I believe it's going to go down to utilization. However, I'm going to put a little asterisk next to it. The ability to understand the experience the user had that during that use time and how productive it was, to feed the model to understand more of this, less of that.
Right. David?
So I think about workplace technology as sort of like two major buckets, and I'm not a technologist, but I think there's the back-end systems, the management systems that folks like me use to understand what's working, what's not working, utilization being one of them, and I think that's huge. We're investing in some pilots to see how are the spaces being used, but I think there's also this big bucket of tools and technologies that are end users experience. And I think when you've taken away a lot of the certainty of the office in terms of my assigned space is here, I can go here every morning. There's this contract between worker and company has sort of been modified in that you don't really know what the situation is when you walk in. So I think having technology at the user's fingertips that allows them to navigate, that allows them to get updates, allows them to see when their coworkers might be nearby, et cetera. There's a real cross-functional opportunity that spans far beyond just the workplace real estate function that I don't think we've really started to take advantage of. And that's, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, and if you think about this merger of real estate and technology, what is best served in the virtual environment and what is best served in the physical? I remember when I started my career, the reason I went into the office, well, everybody did, but because that's where the $100,000 photocopier was, that's where the fancy conference room was, and that's where my files were. Well, all those things are gone, right? We're now in the conference room digitally. Our files are up in the cloud digitally, and there are no photocopiers per se anymore. So what is that technology that's going to have people needing to go back into that office? And I believe it's going to be the immersive collaboration, the Star Trek teleportation kind of things, seeing all of your home workers on a screen in the kitchen. There are a million ideas, and we're out of time, so I'm not going to get to ask the last question, but I'll kind of answer it for us. You saw what happened to this conversation. We just got started. I just want to encourage everybody who's watching or watches this later to get to CoRE Tech. It's going to be a day and a half, small, intimate event where we're going to roll up sleeves and probably ask more questions than we have answers, but we are going to show immersive new technologies that nobody's seen before. Actually, they've been around, but nobody's seen them in a long time. We're going to talk about these virtual environments colliding with the physical space. And what does it mean when you get that perfect blend of real estate and technology to help solve some of these problems? So thank you all for being here today. If this is any indication of what's going to happen when we're together at CoRE Tech, we're in trouble because we could talk for days. And we're going to hopefully have, at least 12 hours that we can roll up some sleeves and get this. So thank you for being our co-chairs. Thank you for investing the time, not just this year, but for the last 10, 15 years, and being leaders that you are, and for your time today. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we're going to be in lots of conversations over the next month and a half. And then we'll see you in San Jose mid-November.
Great. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, Ryan. Bye, Dave.
Bye.
All right. So you saw how that conversation went. We did not even get to the tip of the iceberg. We were planning on detailed conversations on the technology. We ran out of time because those first couple of questions are just so big. I mean, what are we planning for? How many people? How often? And you can't do anything to your built environment until you answer and really challenge yourself on some of those fundamental questions. So with that, let's bring Nancy on for the news this week. Lots going on, Nance. I will get out of your hair. Sorry for being over today, but there's no way we're going to get that into 18 minutes.
Oh, no. Thanks for hey, this is an epic segment as well. I think today is our 100th anniversary.
It is. Yeah. Good job,
congratulations
team.
on 100 of these. And what a great panel to have celebrating with us on that 100th anniversary.
Such smart people. People.
Good.
Let me get out of your way and get to the news.
All right. We have a news graphic coming up. There we go. Here's a recap of a few of the stories from our weekly news briefing, which is published every Thursday morning. Our lead story is from Kevin Kincaid and Andrew Creamer with Grosvenor. They're sharing about shifting their focus from using digital technologies that solely support active occupation to providing a digitally enabled end-to-end customer journey. This is being driven by both occupier demand and an emerging technology industry demonstrating opportunities to drive efficiency, customer satisfaction, insights, and commercial returns through new and innovative products. Innovation and creating a digital by default mindset is now core to the way Grosvenor operates, working with established companies and new prop tech startups to trial technology solutions that improve the tenant experience. Those trials that are successful can be scaled up quickly and integrated with their digital offerings. They're making investments in early stage companies able to support their goals and deliver tangible benefits to their portfolio and for their customers. Check out the article for more on how Grosvenor is integrating the property, the place, and the community in a seamless manner that will differentiate them and the experience for their customers going forward. Our second article comes from our tech partner, CoRE, on the topic of sophisticated simplification for real estate. Authors Ritchie and Dunleavy point out that real estate organizations are powered by complex processes and technology infrastructures. But as market conditions demand increased agility to make nimble business decisions and deliver on seamless experiences for customers, CRE businesses need to look to simplify these processes and architectures to remain relevant. In the age of all things smart, the concept of simplifying is not about dumbing down your processes, but rather about sophisticated simplicity. Processes and technologies that are not just easier to deploy, but easier to adapt, evolve, and use. Ultimately, the goal is to enable not just more responsive business decisions and flexible operational strategies, but logical operations that can easily be adapted by existing and new employees. In doing so, organizations can remove friction, augment what works well, enable what increases speed and efficiencies, and create new value along the way. The article includes some great advice on how to simplify in 4 key areas: your target operating model, your data strategy and integration, your tech stack, and your processes. To summarize, their keep it simple mantra means the fewer moving parts, the easier to deploy, connect, train, and replace the elements of your organization that might be weighing you down. This is a very good, very informative read. And lastly, this week's Smart Building Best Practice Showcase Project Spotlight features Intensity, Schneider Electric's state-of-the-art regional headquarters. Intensity, their newest building of the future, was built to consolidate its 5,000 Grenoble, France employees. They had previously been spread out over 13 sites across the city. The building is all electric, all digital, and designed to use 10 times less energy than the average European building. Equipped with photovoltaic panels, wind turbines, and on-site energy storage, Intensity is energy autonomous. Through a unique microgrid partnership, this energy is also shared with neighboring buildings and the city itself. Showcasing a data-driven design and build, the site is hyper-efficient, fully flexible, and human-centric. And that's a recap of this week's news. You can read these articles in our weekly briefing by visiting our website and clicking the news link at the top.
That Schneider project, that whole Smart Building Showcase, something I think we've been doing about 7-8 years now. The nuggets of information in those projects. I mean, people conceptualize, theorize on what a smart building looks like. We've got hundreds and hundreds of projects that quantify exactly what is that smart building. What did they do with air? What did they do with access control? And that Schneider project is absolutely one. If you're thinking about smart buildings, you don't know what they are, click on that profile, read it. It's got challenges in there. It's got successes in there. A really quick read to understand what a particular smart building looks like.
There's also a link to a video that's very informative as well, showing how they connected all these buildings together.
Cool. Thank you. Great job filling for Howard. I know he's on the road, busy at some forums, and you and Lisa are doing a great job. So thank you.
Have a great weekend.
You too. All right. Before I wrap and tell you about next week, let's hear from our final sponsor. All right, so next week we are going to dig deeper into another interesting topic, important, but from a technical standpoint, very interesting. Mixed reality. So we've got augmented reality, mixed reality, virtual reality. We've got people running around with goggles. Everybody says we're going to spend our lives wearing goggles. I'm not so sure. I'm not going to. But there is some real practical areas where mixed reality goggles or technologies for that matter, can be used inside the built environment. I remember 5 years ago over at the Irvine company where they showed me a demo of a virtualized conference room, and It literally had me ducking down and looking under the table, the virtual table. It was that real. I went on to the windows and I looked outside. I remember probably 7, 8 years ago being at Sprint's headquarters in Kansas City, and they were not doing it yet, but they were toying around with the idea of technicians wearing goggles to look at equipment and to bring in technical expertise where they couldn't handle something on a particular repair or maintenance operation. And you'd have specifications and other engineers with you while you were working on that equipment, all being done virtually. So we have got a great group set up for next week. Confirmed, we've got Stuart Appley and Miguel Tria Vidal from CBRE. They are doing some phenomenal work, and given the size of that organization, you can only imagine the different areas of practice that they've had. And then if all works out, we've got 3 phenomenal women who are rock stars of the AR, VR, mixed reality world, that are going to share not just what's going on in real estate, but some of the applications happening out in the general world. And on that note, it's not mixed reality, but another really crazy technology that we'll be talking about in the weeks and months to come, AI. I think in the next couple of days, if I'm not mistaken, Elon Musk is going to be announcing or showing his new robot. I think it's kind of scary in some respects. We've had some sneak previews of this. I think it's in the next 24, 48 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And I encourage all of you to keep your eye open for that, because I think we're going to start to see how AI and robotics are going to start coming together, and they certainly have a place in the built environment. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to our guests, thank you to our sponsors, thank you to our team for putting this together. And this wraps another episode of RealComm Live, and we will see you next Friday. You be well and have a great weekend. Take care.